head of performance currently at Charlotte FC in Major League Soccer. Before this, my road is kind of winding. I did my undergrad at San Diego State in kinesiology, and after that, I thought I was going to be a physical therapist and realized I wanted to go in the performance space. So, wound up doing an internship at Exos back when it was Core Performance. So that kind of shows my age a bit, and wound up after that working in some sports medicine clinics and got into MLS through that, first as an intern and then as an assistant at Chivas USA, which no longer is an MLS team. So again, shows my age a bit. The owners of LAFC purchased them, folded them, and then a few years later rebranded as LAFC. So I started there as an intern, like I said, probably 12, 13 years ago for a couple of years, and then new ownership purchased them at that time and went a different direction. So that whole staff kind of went to Toronto FC, and I stayed in LA. And I, along with working part-time for them, was also running my own fitness and performance company on the side in Beverly Hills. And so wound up continuing to do that, built that up for a while, was working with, a lot of A-listers and then obviously athletes in the off season and doing off season training, things like that. And it was great, but at the same time, really, really missed the team setting. And so after 5 or 6 years of doing that, decided to do my master's through ACU and did a master high performance sport. And through that, was able to get back in the team setting with the San Jose Earthquakes organization in MLS through their reserve team, which was located in Reno, Nevada. And so made a great transition from Los Angeles to Reno, Nevada. But it was a wonderful time, actually. And I was able to, because it was a lower level, really take everything that I was learning in the master's program that I kind of was upskilling myself because I'd been out of the team setting for a while and put it into practice the very next day with not quite the pressures that you get with the first team. You could kind of make a little more mistakes or experiment a little bit more because it's, a lot of players that we're trying to develop. And so I was there for a year and a half and it was great. And then wound up going to Minnesota United in MLS, first as just the performance specialist, strength coach. And while I was there, I moved there in January 2020, and 2 years later, everything shut down because of COVID. So, moved halfway across the country where I didn't know anybody, and all of a sudden was in the middle of COVID and wondering if my job was still going to be safe. And it wound up that my boss decided to leave once the league started back up again, and we had lost our sports scientist to another team. So all of a sudden, I went from just being the strength coach to doing everything and being the head of performance because I was the only person on staff that was a performance person. And so was able to do what I was doing in Reno, where I was doing everything, but at a much higher scale in MLS. And we went into the MLS's back bubble and did really well. And I continued on the rest of that year as the only performance person on staff. And we were 15 minutes away from the final and had a great season. And so stayed there. And then the next year we brought in a high performance director from overseas that didn't really work out after a few months and was let go. And so I went back to doing the same thing, taking over everything and really diving into that. And after that season, got a call asking if I'd be interested in coming to Charlotte FC. It was an expansion team. And, the more and more I discussed it with my current boss, John McGregor, about the opportunity as far as starting from scratch and really kind of trying to build a foundation of a brand new club. I thought it was a fantastic opportunity because I didn't think I would be able to get this again in my career, of being able to start from scratch and really kind of lay the foundations of things. So now in our third season here, and we just kicked on, and we're about 4 weeks into our preseason now, and start the third regular season in about 2 weeks.
A quick question: did your family move with you when you moved to all these different places, or do they stay put?
So when I left LA, I had actually just been divorced, so it was kind of a good reason to leave LA. And so the whole time I was in Reno and kind of Minnesota, was single, and then met my now wife while I was in Minnesota my last year. And luckily for me and for her, through COVID and everything, she's very high up in the corporate realm at this company called Target here in the US. And because of her position, she's able to work remotely now. And so we were able to make the decision of, let's go to Charlotte. It's a great opportunity. It's a great city. It's a wonderful place. It's far better weather than Minnesota. And, so she was able to come with me. And so we've been enjoying our time there. But that is definitely something that was only because she's able to be remote. Otherwise, it would have been a much tougher decision to make that move halfway across the country.
And Adam, A-list celebrities, who was your biggest celebrity
To be honest,
I'm sure you've been asked
there are
that so many
still
times. That's pretty
I know
corny. But
there's still some NDAs that are to
oh,
go
is
10
there?
years, so I
Okay.
can't. Yeah,
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 yeah.
because there's some people in that realm that you know, try and have that persona of being like really really fit all the time and working out and stuff, and they don't really.
Not the
They hire
case.
people to get ready for the role, so you have to they have to be, have contracts and stuff like that. But I was able to work with a lot of people who were actually from overseas, and I had a lot of TV stars, and then some singers and stuff like that. But the place that I worked in was basically a celebrity performance center, and so I was working alongside a lot of really really good strength coaches, some big names in that field now. So if you know like a Ben Bruno, I was working alongside him. Brett Bartholomew actually was there for a little while, right when he released the Art of Coaching book, excuse me, the Conscious Coaching book. And so he was a wonderful person to kind of work alongside and kind of see him work day in, day out. And there was a couple of other really, really fantastic strength coaches there who were working with some big names. And so it was more so the people that when I would go in and look around and say, what am I doing in here? Like it was kind of one of those things when I first started working in that. It's just seeing all these other fantastic strength coaches, but then all the people that they had and saying, this, how did I get into this? I was just working in MLS and in sports medicine clinics, and now I'm in this. And so it was an interesting transition, but in the end, I realized that my passion really, really was in team sports and working collectively towards goals and not necessarily running a business. And also when you're in that environment, you see somebody for a few months, but then they go on set for 9 to 12 months for this, or you're working with them for 8 to 12 weeks to get ready for a photo shoot or whatever it is. And then you don't see them for a while. So you're constantly having to kind of drum up that business and make the contacts and everything. And some people love it. And some of my good friends who I worked with thrive in it and have amazing gyms and careers. And it was just one of those things after a few years that I realized, I truly belong in the team setting, and that's where my passion lies, and especially in football and soccer. So it was a wonderful opportunity for me to kind of make the transition back into the team setting when I had that opportunity through the ACU program and through some connections I had with the San Jose Earthquakes organization. And I jumped at it. Didn't matter if it was Reno or somewhere that was a tiny little town. I wanted to get back in, and so it was the right call because I'm now where I'm at, and this is a fantastic place and a great club, and I've had a lot of opportunities to really do some incredible things in a couple of years that I wouldn't have dreamed about 4 or 5 years ago.
If you know what I'm asking, 'cause I have a feeling that I've been to that gym. What was it? What's it
Uh,
called?
so one of the ones that I worked out of was called Granite Gym, and it's right in
Okay.
the heart of Beverly Hills. And then a good friend of mine who was also a business partner on a different venture, his Kevin Lilly, he is one of the owners of Heart and Hustle, and they're another big celebrity gym. And then they had an offshoot of this place called Trainer Republic that I would work out of as well. And so it's kind of a combination of those 2 to 3 places where all of those people were before Ben went off on his own, and obviously Brett moved back to Atlanta to start out the Art of Coaching and everything like that. So it was a cool place to be for those couple of years. But like I said, I'm really really happy where I'm at now.
Nice. Right. This unique opportunity to start something from scratch, like you say, comes round once in a blue moon. Probably the first time and only time it's going to happen in your career. Nothing's there. Where did you start? Like, what was your thought process? Like the culture, the facility, the people. What was the first thing on your list to sort? And let's go through that journey because I think it'll be an interesting one. Because I think it's probably something that 99.9% of people in your position would just love to get their hands on. So, what did you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everybody has visions and grandiose visions of if we were able to do something from scratch and take everything that is good and then throw away the bad stuff that you see, what would I do? And so I think that was kind of the thought process for all of us, myself, my boss. So I was initially hired on as the performance specialist, where I was kind of doing a dual role of the strength coach and sports science aspect. And it was really, okay, how are we going to build this from scratch? How are we going to create a culture of performance? And we had a lot of discussions in how we were going to do this. But then reality hits, and one of the biggest things is, obviously not only are all of the staff new to each other for the most part, but you now have 30 players who are all brand new to each other too, because there's no pre-existing last season and this and that. A few people had played against each other in different leagues and whatnot, but it was really a challenge just to kind of get the group to be cohesive in general, just because everybody was brand new to each other. And I think at that time we had players, obviously this from football, but 17 countries, I think 14 or so different languages being spoken in the locker room. And so the main thing was just trying to get everybody on the same page and try to start with an education process of why we're going to do what we're going to do. And then we did run into some difficulties because our department was hired separately from the coaches. And so one of the positions that the first head coach brought in was a head fitness coach. And to be honest, they just didn't understand or respect the physicality of MLS. And, I remember having a lot of very heated discussions about why we needed to be doing certain things in the gym, certain strength and power things, certain conditioning, like how we needed to be training and this and that. And at times it was very much no, we don't need to do that. Like, we're going to just pass around teams. And, there was one time I'll never forget, where we had a discussion where saying, the guys in Barcelona like Xavi and Iniesta, and that they didn't need to go in the gym. So why do we? And it's just, I'm sorry, but with all due respect, we don't have some of the greatest players of all time on our team right now, and it's a different league. And so some of the veterans that had played in MLS were coming to myself, my boss, and kind of our staff, and saying, hey, like, I don't feel prepared. I need more, I need extra, and wanting to do stuff on the side. And so it's kind of marrying the two of how do we do stuff, but how do we educate the current coaching staff on why we need to increase some of the physicality and some of the demands. And in the end, they only lasted about 4 months, and they were let go from the club. And so the interim coach, he was one of the assistants for the rest of the season. He had worked in the league before, and he had been at Man City before that, and Nice and stuff. And he bought into everything we were doing right off the bat. And so for us, it was kind of like those first 4 months were really just trying to lay the foundation of, like, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. Really trying to educate players. There wasn't a lot of accountability from some of the members of that coaching staff, and so it was difficult to really have full compliance. But then once we kind of took everything over, because we had laid that foundation of just the education piece and really showing people that what we're trying to do, especially players who hadn't really done much in the gym before or hadn't done a lot of speed work, things like that on the pitch, very foreign to them, showing them during those few months, this is how it's going to help benefit you, and then kind of, bringing the data to them or certain things so that the light bulb goes off. And then when we take over, it's like, okay, this is why we're shifting to this is how we're doing it. And then the players who had been doing it all along or who were used to it kind of were able to bring the rest of the team along and really start creating a culture of performance the rest of that season. And then really what we did was we just slowly chipped away at things and slowly started dripping in new stuff or more accountability, more compliance type things, certain monitoring aspects and whatnot, so that by the end of that season, we had really established a good foundation. And then going into the second year, we had that credibility with both the coaches and the players, because a lot of them were returning, and we could build on that. And then the second season was really expanding what we were doing, because we had that buy-in. We had the credibility already for what we had done. And then the second season, not only expanding on what we were doing and really trying to get closer and closer to our true goals of our performance culture, but also the second season became very much about designing and building the facility, a brand new facility for us that we could eventually move into, which we did 3/4 of the way through the season. So then it was always kind of an eye on that. And so then we start shifting some of the things that we're doing, both before training, after training, some of the monitoring, to, well, how is this eventually going to evolve into what we're doing when we're in the facility, so that it's not, we're doing it this way here, and then all of a sudden we're in a facility and it's a completely different, environment. So that became the part of the focus, was shifting that. And we did a really good job of that over the course of the season. And then once we got into the facility, it's like everybody kind of just took off, and we had fantastic results. The last kind of third or last quarter of the season wound up sneaking into the playoffs. But it was just a the mindset of the players, and they had gotten used to what we were asking and what we were demanding and what we were looking at. And it was a really easy transition for them once we were in a space where they had everything readily available that we had been working on the entire time.
How did you go about hiring staff? Were you brought in by the club with a number of other performance medical staff, or were you put in, then you were in charge of hiring?
Yeah, so when I was first brought in, like I said, I was the strength coach and sports scientist. So I was really the only performance person on staff that was hired away from the coaches. Like I said, we had the head fitness coach initially for that first coach, and then my boss, who is the director of performance sports science, and he is basically a high performance director. He oversees medical and performance. And so we had the 3 athletic trainers that are mandated by MLS on the medical side from that standpoint, and then it was just me and then the head fitness coach. And then when he was let go with the coaching staff, I was the only performance person really on staff. And so again, kind of took me back to what I did in Minnesota and previously in Reno, where it's like, okay, I'm a one-man band, but I can do this and figure it out. The only caveat to that was we were operating out of the stadium where we play, but because we didn't have a true facility, we were busing to a field to train about 20 minutes away every day. And so that dynamic was a little bit different. And so having to do things slightly different, altering timelines and whatnot. But after several months of that, we were able to bring in somebody to kind of take over the position that I'd been in and really just focus on the gym aspect and be our strength coach for the last few months of the season. And then he decided that he kind of wanted to get out of the team setting and went into the tech space. And so we brought in another strength coach who had worked in MLS for 4 or 5 years, and I knew pretty well, named Pete Gorka, and he's still with us now. So he came in at the beginning of last season, and so he handles pretty much all of the strength and power programming, a lot of our pre-training stuff, which we term performance preparation, and then also he oversees all of our performance monitoring. So our jump testing, like all of our valve stuff, our force frame, our NordBoard stuff, but then, several other things that we're doing as well. And so that's kind of his role, and he oversees that. And so he's the only other performance person on staff up until this year, where we now then just hired on Matt Pell, who obviously from Catapult a bit, as our head of performance science. So he's kind of taken a lot of the sports science stuff off of my plate so that I can really, really focus on just all of the performance from not only first team, but everything all the way down throughout the club. And so that's been fantastic. Obviously, I've worked with Pelly for years and know him really well. And, we got really lucky. He was already living in Charlotte, and so it was an easy sell for him when he wanted to get back in, but also he knows all of us really well and has worked with us a lot. And so it's been great getting him in this year and working with him in preseason and really kind of building out a lot of things that we've been wanting to do and just haven't had some of the manpower. And so that's kind of the way that our first team performance staff is set up, is myself and Pell, and then we have a head athletic trainer, obviously, on the medical side, and then there's 2 athletic trainers, 1 strength coach, and then we have people at each level underneath as well.
Because that sounds super exciting. I'm sure there's people going, I'm so jealous to not only be able to set up a department, but set up a new facility. But one thing you didn't mention that we spoke about previously was the setting up of the structure below the first team and building that performance pathway. How did you decide where to start on that? Like, what were your big rocks that you wanted to get in place to then build on?
Yeah, I think that was another kind of eye-opening experience for me when I came into the club, and then we started our second team because MLS started its own kind of reserve league or second team league called MLS Next Pro. And all of a sudden, talking to the key stakeholders and saying, we now have a direct pathway to the first team, right? Because we've had an academy for a few years, then we had the first team, and now we have a second team. Is there anything in place? What are we doing to ensure, not just from a technical side with the coaching staff, but is there a framework or anything that has been proposed as far as how we're going to develop players physically? And they said, no, why don't you put something together and present it to us? And so I did, and they said, this is great. You guys work on this, and which was fantastic. And so for me, it was really just, we have a brand new opportunity to create a physical development pathway from scratch, and so taking stuff that we've all experienced in different places and saying, okay, how would we do this now that we get to start it, there's a blank canvas. What do we want to do? And the big thing for me was I wanted to bring in all of the performance coaches from all levels, and not just have it be something that I'm saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. You guys need to implement it, because that's not the type of leader I am. And also, I'm not going to sit here and say that I am an expert in the youth space, because I haven't worked in it too much. But we have fantastic performance coaches who are in our academy, who live and breathe that every day, who love that, who that's all that they look at. That's what their passion is. So why would I not take their feedback and say, okay, how are we going to build this out for the 14s, 15s, 17s, et cetera, and they're able to kind of put their stamp on it. And then now they have skin in the game, so to speak, but they're a part of it. So now it creates ownership for all of us and buy-in from all of the staff to really make this the best it can be, instead of just saying, okay, this is the model that we're going to follow, make sure we follow it. And so we, over the course of the past year, have been really building out all of our progressions, regressions, basically kind of, we term the framework, but a better term for it is actually a curriculum. And so it's really just at the 14s, which is our youngest level that we see on a regular basis. We have 12s and 13s that are kind of within a community that are affiliated and do some stuff with us, but really the ones that are in the facility every day are 14s, 15s, 17s, and then we have a 20s, and then we have our reserve team, and then the first team, all of which are using the same gym. So when we designed the gym, myself and my boss John in the facility, it was very much told from the beginning, like, everyone, we're gonna have one big gym for everyone. So it needs to be designed so that not just with first team needs, but you need to be thinking about everyone. And so we have time slots for all the teams. And so it was really just bringing everyone together and saying, okay, how do we do this from 14s? If, a bilateral push, what is our optimal exercise, peak we want to get them to by the time they're hitting the reserve team, and then we can perfect it going in the first team, et cetera. Then what are we working backwards from there? What are we doing? What are the progressions, regressions from 14s, 15s, 17s, 20s each year over year to get there? And then we kind of went through that with every single big rock exercise that we would do for strength and power throughout the gym. And then on top of that, the next phase is the movement skills. What are we doing to really work on their acceleration mechanics, their deceleration, their top end speed, et cetera, like on the pitch? How are we doing that? And then what kind of conditioning are we putting together for each one? And really taking a lot of the ideas from Des Ryan when he was at Arsenal, the stuff that he put out, and just kind of taking some of those kind of pillars and saying, okay, these are some of the pillars we're going to work on, but then we're going to do it in our own way. And the rest of the staff really jumped in and loved it. And I was able to kind of put it on them and say, you guys come up with this, the progressions, regressions, because I want to know what you want to do. How are we going to build these things out? You're the ones, again, living, breathing this with these players every day. I'm with the first team, all the time. So I want you guys to tell me what you see and what you find optimal. And then we would have discussions in our monthly meetings and kind of come up with all of this and then put it into a document. And then basically now we're at the point where we've finalized our curriculum, and it's easy to say, okay, here's how we're going to progress someone from U14s all the way to the first team, and all of these different movements and all of these different movement skills and conditioning. How are we going to do this? What are we going to do to develop? And then obviously it's on us as coaches to know when to progress, regress, when to lateralize based on their peak height velocity, anything like that. If somebody's a high potential player that he's a 15-year-old, but he's training with the first team, okay, well, he's probably not going to be doing a lot of the same stuff that the first team is doing. So where is he at on this curriculum? And so it just allows us to be able to kind of slide, back and forth and really make sure that we are not letting anything fall through the cracks. And, again, I don't want it to feel like a cookie cutter approach for our coaches, but this is just a guideline for how we're going to progress. And then it's up to them to know, how to individualize, especially for certain players that we're trying to move through the pathway faster. And so it's been a really fun project, and I think for all of us, and at times it's been frustrating because we wanted to get going sooner, but we wanted to make sure that we did it in a really good way. And I think we've come to a pretty good spot where we're at now, and now we're starting to implement it in this year. And then it allows me as the head of performance to have discussions with each of these coaches and say, okay, what does your program look like for the next 6 weeks? Why are you doing this? How are you progressing here? And make sure that we're actually doing what we say we're going to do. Because it's one thing to have this great shiny document this for key stakeholders and say, okay, we're going to do all of these things, but are we actually doing it? Are we actually developing them the way that we want to and that we're saying? Because otherwise, what are we doing here? Then it's just how it used to be, and it is at other clubs that I know of where everyone's doing different things, and it's kind of just like, hopefully we develop these players, instead of saying we have a systematic process for what we're going to do, and we'll continue to fine tune it, and it will evolve over time, and we'll perfect it and get better and better and better, and hopefully it results in more and more players coming through our pathway.
I was going to ask you who you were looking to for inspiration, and for some reason I had a feeling you were going to say Des from his time at Arsenal, because he's put so much out there and been so open of what what he did. So yeah, that's cool. So you mentioned, just moving on from the kind of pathway stuff, you mentioned about the performance preparation before the lads go out versus calling it a warm up. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about that? What you've changed, what that looks like? How does it differ? How do you perceive it to differ to a traditional warm up?
Yeah, I think it was a discussion that we had in the off season and even towards the end of last season. Now that we moved into our facility, we have this phenomenal gym that, I'm biased because I helped design it, but I would put it up there against pretty much all the gyms and the weight rooms in MLS, and there's probably a lot around the world I would put it up in against. It's phenomenal. Play did a fantastic job helping us really design that. So we have this amazing space, all of this fantastic equipment. We have a huge turf area right outside the weight room to do all sorts of movement skills, and mechanics and things like that. And it was more just trying to marry the idea of getting the guys in there doing more prep work in there versus trying to warm them up, a general warm up on the field, and also taking what the players had come back with and saying, players always want to be on the ball, right? They don't care, especially the first team, that we need to work on acceleration or we need to, prep them for a lot of change of direction today because we're doing small side or anything like that. They just want to be on the ball right away.
Just give me the ball.
Exactly. And we do a pretty good job in the past of, having certain warm-ups with the ball and certain ones that aren't, and kind of making sure that we're giving them a little bit of that, but then also that we are really focusing on things that they need to prepare them for what the demands are going to be in the session. So our idea on the performance side basically became, well, we have all this space, we have all this stuff. We can really have them do a 30 to 40 minute, really good prep kind of warm up, so to speak, to prime them to go right on the pitch. And then that way we don't need to take the time on the pitch, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, whatever, to do some sort of warm up. They can get right into passing, rondos, whatever it is, get on the ball, and they're already going to be prepared, and we don't have to worry about the fact that, they're going out there cold or anything like that. So we put it all together and basically include all as part of our performance preparation, which is we kind of termed it that this year. And we're taking all of their individual prehab exercises that they need to do, along with any sort of mobility, a lot of dynamic flexibility, things like that. But then along with that, certain plyos that we're having them do, and then we incorporate our performance monitoring into that. So if they have, counter movement jumps that day on the force decks, or if they have, ABAD squeezes on the force frame, or if they have hamstring ISO 30s, again, all depending on what we're doing in training that day, that will be incorporated into that after they've done a lot of exercises to make sure that they're kind of warm for that. And then they move on into a lot of the movement skill stuff on the turf to prepare them for the demand. So obviously if it's a lot of change of direction stuff, they'll do a lot of different drills on the actual turf area, whether it's resisted or not. If it's absolute speed or acceleration based, like we have run rockets and we have a lot of bands and stuff. So we'll have them do certain accelerations, like explosive starts, things like that as we're progressing through. And then they basically finish with the first part of their strength and power session for the day. So we kind of we'll have them do their power exercises as a finisher to kind of prime them so that they can literally go from there, grab their boots, walk straight onto the pitch. We already know that they've hit everything that we would have wanted to hit in the actual warm up on the pitch, but now they can just get right into ball work, right? Which is what they want to do anyway. And then also it gives more time to the coaching staff as well, so that they don't have to, plan for an extra 10 to 15 minutes for whatever it is that we're going to do for a warm-up. They've already done everything they need to do from a physical preparation standpoint. Get on the ball, get them into training, and focus on what we need to do for the day. And it's been pretty good. Obviously in preseason, it's hard because we're not, in our facility. We were only in our facility for a few days in between trips. So we've done a lot of the physical prep or the performance prep on the pitch beforehand, but the players understand. We educated them. I gave them a presentation as far as this is how we're building stuff. This is why it's going to be this way. And so then the week that we were actually in Charlotte in between our 2 trips, we tried it out, and it worked really well. And the players seem to respond really well to it, and they understand it now. And so I'm really excited to see kind of moving forward how it evolves, and how much more buy-in we get from the players, especially some of our older veterans who you could tell were kind of a little bit, you know, not necessarily bought into being in the weight room as much before training, but when we explain it to them and show them, and then they see the exercises they're doing and how it's preparing them, it's like, oh, okay, no, actually, I get this, and I keep telling them this is what allows you to get right on the ball right away. You know, if you do this and you do this properly, there's no need for us to go through any sort of general warm up or any sort of specific warm up on the field. We'll still incorporate on days when we want to, you know, we're having our, you know, extensive days, or we're opening up and we're doing a lot of high speed running, sprinting. You know, the coaching staff, we've got a lot of buy-in from them with this, as far as if they need to, after doing passing or rondos or a first possession or whatever, if they need to come over to me and do, you know, some sprint prep exercises or some build-ups or some XLD cell work, whatever it is, for a couple minutes in between drills, like that's perfectly fine, and we'll have them do that to make sure that they get it, but then they go right back in. And so I think everyone from players, staff, and coaching staff have really enjoyed the way that we're setting things up, and so far it's worked pretty well. And I envision it kind of improving and evolving over time to really be in a really good spot. And then we've started to kind of trickle that down in the lower level. So, you know, our second team performance coach is doing the same thing right now back at home, because they're in a preseason as well. So they're doing this very similar performance prep for a half hour before they go out on the pitch. And then even some of our academy teams are doing it as well, if they can get in the into the weight room beforehand, or we have kind of a gym in a box next to some of the academy fields, and so he'll kind of take them through some stuff there, and then that way they can get right in when training is supposed to start at whatever time with the technical coaches.
So very non-traditional when it comes to football, and I can imagine, like you said, the veterans going, this isn't what this. Where's the 2 lines and the cones that we've been used to seeing for the last 15 years? Okay, interesting. The Run Rockets, have they actually put any tech in the Run Rockets yet, Adam? Or is the Run Rocket the same as the Run Rocket's always been?
It's pretty similar. The ones we have, we got about 2 years ago. So I honestly don't know if they have a new edition from there. Obviously, we basically just use it. Our strength coach will set whatever the resistance needs to be for certain players, tell them to go here, go there. We also have speed sacks and things like that. So we'll use a lot of different kind of modalities, so to speak, for some of our, especially our acceleration work, and then a little bit of our absolute speed stuff. But it's really just to, again, provide a little bit of that resistance. And he's a better person to answer as far as whether or not there's more tech, or if there's a new addition, you know, because he's always coming to me with, like, should we get this, should we get that, you know? And so I'm sure that there's a lot of other stuff that we could be using, but so far it's been pretty good as far as what we're doing, and the players actually buying in. And we're even utilizing those with our keepers as well for their performance prep, for a lot of Excel work or change of direction stuff, you know, just to provide that resistance and get some explosiveness before they go on the pitch as well.
How do you approach the goalkeeper stuff? Do you have, obviously, in terms of staff, that just incorporates within the strength coach's remit? I know here in the UK, there's becoming goalkeeper specific S&C coaches who are looking after the keepers, not at the first team, but the whole, you know, down the academy and things. But how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think actually it's funny you say that. I saw something recently. I think it was Norwich posted a job that was for a goalkeeper specific performance coach, and that was during our off season. And I thought that was really interesting, and it kind of went along the lines of some of the stuff that we were starting to do last year, where our strength coach actually was a keeper growing up playing, and also in college here in the States. So he already kind of has an affinity for the coaches, or for the keepers. And our goalkeeper coach would go to him a lot last year, you know, when they were discussing what they're doing, you know, in the gym and as their prep work and everything. And so, you know, just had a discussion with my boss, our director, in the off season, said, why don't we put Pete kind of as an expansion of his role, not just helping with doing the programming for the keepers, but he's actually going to be meeting with our goalkeeper coach along with myself and Pelly, but Pete especially, on a regular basis to help plan their periodization and their loading on field as far as their jumping, their diving, etc. And then to, again, make sure that that coincides with what they're doing in the gym beforehand as far as their prep work, but then also their strength and power sessions afterwards, so that we really have a global view of everything they're doing. It's not they did a ton of stuff on the pitch, a ton of explosive jumps and everything, and then all of a sudden they're coming right in and doing more plyos, right? So it's really trying to make sure that we have a better understanding of everything that's happening, and he's really taking that and running with it, because again, he has an affinity for that position anyway. And so we were talking about that a little bit last year, and I really took that from looking at that job description that just popped up. I think it was on LinkedIn or something like that for Norwich, and I said, "Oh yeah, okay, I think we're on the right track here then if we're going to do this." And so it's been pretty good so far, and I think we're going to continue to really build that out. And we're building out lots of different visuals and periodization stuff, and Pelly's a wizard with all of that, so he's really taking it and running it as well. And hopefully we can come up with a similar type of thing that we're doing with the field players as far as our framework and curriculum, but we can do that top down for the keepers as well, based on all the things that we're doing here at the first team.
It's really interesting because certainly from my experience, they just do their own thing, like they disappear into the distance and do their own thing, and then they come back for the game at the end or the shooting at the end. They don't really ask any questions. They just do their own thing, and they're crazy, and they're just left to get at their own devices. But obviously that's quickly changing with this Norwich. I think there was a Newcastle one as well, I seem to think, but there was definitely another one. So yeah, it's certainly an interesting area, really interesting area. But in terms of one thing that we spoke about when we're chatting through these discussion points and what could be really interesting for people, and it maybe dives into Matt's stuff as well on the GPS side, it's that video and wearable integration to give you guys more context of not they're just player X did this, player Y did that, but actually marrying these two things together using the video to give extra context. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about why you're doing that, how you're going about that, and where kind of Matt's expertise plugs in as of his recent hire?
Yeah, this is an area that we're really, really excited about. I think we actually have a meeting this morning with Catapult to go over some stuff, but this is something that Matt and myself and John, my boss, that we've been talking about this for probably a year and a half now. Obviously, Catapult has Match Tracker, and we've looked into that as far as the wearable integration. But one of the things that we're really interested in, and one of the questions that we were trying to answer is, what are we doing in training to make sure that we are really meeting the demands of the matches? We get all the information from the matches. There's all sorts of analytics and things like that, whether it's through the league or through Match Tracker or anything like that. But how can we really analyze what we're doing in training and through video, so that we're getting more context, as far as, instead of just getting a summary report of, like you said, player X did this, and that, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, player X, who's a center back, all of a sudden had 175 meters of sprint in training today, and that's not what we had targeted or projected at all. Like, red flag or whatever it is. It's now we can look at that video. We're using Focus, which is another product through Catapult, where we can upload all of our training video and basically sync it with our wearable stuff, so that we can actually see not just where that player did that sprint or did a large sprint or whatever it is, but the context of why. And then we can sit with the coaches and say, okay, here's the video, here's what this player did, here's the speed they hit, here's the type of run, whatever it is. Were they supposed to do that, or is this an outlier? Is this something that we need to be worried about? And if they say, no, actually, this is exactly what we were targeting, this is what we talked about in video with them before, and this is why we worked on that, because of this situation here. Okay, well then for us, it's not necessarily as big of a red flag. Obviously, there's a spike and whatnot from loading, but it's so much more context than just looking at the GPS report. And even if you're just trying to look at a video on your own, but now we can marry the two and really have all of the wearable data popping up and populating as we're looking at this video. And so that was one of the things that we wanted to answer. And the other thing that I think is even more important to us is, are we really creating the demands within the drills that the coaches are designing of what we want to meet in the match? And so on one end, we can use the annotations through Catapult, obviously 1 minute, 5 minute, 10 minute peak intensities throughout the match, right? And we can look at all that. And Pelly's been working on that even before when he was at Catapult. We were working on that a lot last year, and looking at kind of the most chaotic moments of the game or the highest peak intensities, and then trying to put that into the drills and say, okay, are these drills eliciting that? But now we can take that, and then with the video, we can really look at whether it's doing it in real time, so to speak, when you're looking at the video and have the numbers popping up, especially with something like an acceleration load, and which is an intensity metric that we're really looking at. Are we hitting those peak match demands or higher, so that we know that we can withstand them within the match? But then you're actually seeing it happen, and you're getting the metrics within the video as you're watching it to make sure that we're hitting it. Or if it's not, why are we not doing it? What's the context within the drill? What needs to be changed? And then that's a conversation that we're actually able to have with the coaching staff of, okay, this was the goal for this drill. We wanted to hit X amount here or do this, and we didn't. Well, why is that the case? Okay, when we look at the video and have the integration from the wearables, now we can see why we're not doing it, or what's happening, or what this player is doing differently, or why. And then they're able to take that, whether it's technical, tactical, and we can make tweaks so that we are, the next time we do it, trying to hit those peak demands, or again, at a higher level so that they're able to withstand it. And so it's still very early days for us with a lot of this, but those are a lot of the questions that we're really trying to answer. And then the kind of the next step is also Dean Smith, who's our new coach. He's very interested in what's happening in possession, out of possession. So now we can take that from the video as well with the wearable data and look at it, certain players or the team as a whole, when we're in possession, out of possession. What are the metrics within certain drills? What are we doing? How does this look? And again, it's really about just trying to bring the coaches under our tent, but us under their tent a little bit more, so that we're kind of speaking all the same language and really working towards the same goal, and have more information and something that they're used to looking at, which is video, as opposed to just reading the reports at the end and having discussions. It's really like, how can we sit down and kind of look at everything globally and say, this and this go together, this is why, and then what do we need to change, or what are we doing that's good that we need to keep? And it just allows all of us to kind of have a better workflow, I think.
How was this integration meant? What's the integration meant for you in terms of your understanding and detailed understanding of the game itself, of the tactical, the technical aspects of the game, versus being a performance guy when you look at the physical numbers, and that's kind of sitting over here, with the technical and tactical sitting over here, because what you're doing is that. So this physical side is having to be kind of underpinned by this knowledge of the technical and tactical, which I'm guessing you've obviously got because you've been around the game long enough. But when you're dealing with someone that's managing the Premier League and has that unbelievable understanding of that, I suppose, have you had to kind of up your game to be
Absolutely.
to be able to understand what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been a fantastic education process for me, just going through this. Even last year when we were starting to dive into stuff and trying to look at Match Tracker and just looking at what's happening in a match from a context standpoint of looking at the data that we see, summary at the end, but then being able to see the actual specific run. What are they doing? What's the arc of it? What's the situation there? And building out, at the time, whether it was the warm-up stuff last year or having more discussions with the coaches as far as, okay, this is a drill that you guys are going to do, but can we make this run look like this, because this is what happens in a match, and then this is the speed that they get up to, and all of these different things, and having that discussion, some of that education. But now you bring in Dean, and the stuff that he is pushing and for our staff to be doing, especially, like I said, the in possession, out of possession, and the match demands and the peak intensities, really looking at all of that, and then understanding, well, why are we hitting it, or why are we not hitting that? What is they're big on spacing, and all of these different things that I know of, but just being able to kind of hear that on a regular basis, and when you're looking at it and say, okay, this is why this is happening, this is why this is happening, this is how this person's going here, which is causing this, from the physical data. It's just, again, it's such a brilliant way to put stuff together that I think so many teams are going to start doing. I know there's a lot of teams that are already doing it across the world, but I think it's really, this is something Pelly and I talk about a lot. Like it's really the future of performance, I think, is really being able to take all of that physical stuff and put it with the video, so that it's almost happening simultaneously, the technical, tactical, and the physical all within the same realm and everyone is speaking the same language, and you're really having a greater understanding of the game overall, not just one aspect of it. I think that's really what we're trying to get to, is where everything is happening all simultaneously. And when we're picking drills, it's because of all of these reasons, not just because it's technical tactical, or not just because we're going to hit these physical targets. It's, we're going to get all of 3, 4, 5 of these things together in one that's going to check this box, and we know that we're going to be better prepared on the pitch from a physical, technical, tactical standpoint.
Another way you're making the most of your GPS is SpeedSig. Our mutual friend Jason Weber. So tell us a little bit about how you're utilizing that, where you're utilizing that, just briefly.
Yeah, SpeedSig is really interesting for us. We kind of tested it out a little bit last year and played with it, but didn't have as much buy-in from our previous coaching staff last year on doing some of these things. But again, Dean has been great because he's been around some really high-level professionals when he was in the Premier League. So he's very open to us doing a lot of different things and bringing stuff to him. And so this is one of the things that we talked about. And we had Jason out here at the end of last year and put together a presentation on really what we could truly do, because we had just been scratching the surface. And so starting with preseason this year, we've been using SpeedSig, every single week, so a lot of times multiple sessions a week. And we're really just, again, scratching the surface. But what we've been doing is we have a lot of sprint prep exercises that we build into, like a lot of people do in preseason, where, they're running a certain distance at 60%, a couple days later, 70%, 80%. And so every time that we were doing those, every single player was wearing one of the SpeedSig belts, and we just pop, all of our staff would run over, pop out their GPS, put it in the belt around the lumbar. And then as they do these runs, we're tracking that basically, and then we can upload it into the SpeedSig website, and then we have data. And now we have data at sub-max velocities, right? And so we're able to track them at 60%, 70%, 80%, et cetera, and really look at their running mechanics, obviously in a constant velocity. But then we also started incorporating, as we got higher in 80% and 90% and smaller spaces, really looking at what do they do when they accelerate, because they have to accelerate so quickly there to get up to speed in a small amount of space. But then also we have the deceleration profile as well. So now we're able to build out a full profile through preseason of their acceleration profile, their deceleration profile, and then their constant velocity profile. And for us, we're building all of this, we're getting all of this data throughout preseason, so that at the end of it, we're able to take a look and really look at the loading profile, the running profile for each player, and what are we seeing, who's compensating here, whose mechanics are off here, what is going on. And then when we look at the needs analysis for all of our players, does that match up with some of the other issues that we've seen, through our performance monitoring or through previous injury history or anything like that. And so I think it's just one more piece of the puzzle that we can use to really look at stuff. And one of the things that Jason says all the time is, and I know he said it on the podcast with you a few weeks ago, is we do jumping with force plates and all sorts of stuff all the time, right? But other than a few laboratories in the world, you don't really get that from horizontal when you're running. You don't get that measure. So what do players do all the time? They're on the pitch, they're running. They're sprinting, they're accelerating, their deceleration. So how can we really look at that and analyze it and make sure that we're not letting something fall through the cracks? And so for us, that is the main reason why we started incorporating it. And again, it's early days, but we are going to analyze it, and it's something that